wonderful to have you here on the Dunedin Stories podcast.
Kia ora, Bex. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. For our audience's purposes, do you want to let them know who you are and what you're representing today?
Oh, yes, I will. My name's Chaim, which I'll explain if invited. I'm Ōtepoti, Dunedin lad from a long ways back, child of the 70s, and happen to have found myself 12 years deep in a career, a calling in funeral service. I work for Hope and Sons, which is it's a firm that came together in 1877.
A couple of years ago.
So I've been on board for 12 years of the 137. So wow. I'm a fraction.
Well, I would like to invite you to tell us the story behind your name, for starters. I think that's really awesome.
Thank you. It's a wonderful icebreaker, my name. Yeah. And I've never been neurotic about it. I'm proud of it. My mum found it. She was reading some Jewish literature whilst pregnant with me in 1974. And she was reading a book by Chaim, who was a well-known Jewish author, and his first name took her fancy. It's sometimes pronounced Chaim, but Chaim is generally more digestible.
Yeah.
And here's the beauty, and around the concept of nominative determinism, which talks about how your name might reflect what you end up doing. L'chaim means to life. It's cheers. It's something that people might, not so common in this neck of the woods, but whilst people are toasting a memory or a relationship and a connection, l'chaim is not uncommon.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
And, whereas it might wrong foot people because they're worried about how to pronounce it and that they're dishonouring me or what have you, I'm quick to let them know that that's not my gig.
No.
In my work, it's not really about me, but boy, is it a nice moment for people to climb outside what might be an overwhelming moment with so many preoccupations and stresses and anxieties, and they have a chance to talk about something otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful.
It's about me. Yeah, so it's a bit of a gift.
Well, see, I'm in a bit of a quandary because Rebecca is from the Bible, so I might need a bit of a career change if you're familiar with what Rebecca got up to.
Was she involved in an ancient industry? Or?
She was involved in an ancient industry.
I see, yeah. And
funny.
Of course, I represent an ancient industry today because people have been dying for a long time.
They have. So do you want to fill us in? Because I don't expect you grew up as a little boy expecting this was going to be your career.
No.
What was your pathway towards this?
Oh, gosh. Like I say, child of the 70s, which is suddenly nigh on 50 years ago.
Familiar.
Yeah, which is a really interesting experience. And being loyal and local, and very affectionate towards the city. I grew up in it and I involved myself in the things that were here. No musical talent, but I was fascinated by what we'll call the Dunedin sound. And nearby from here, as a 14-year-old, I stood in the Crown and was at Sammy's, and I was there for the music. Yeah. So enjoyed Dunedin's culture, dragged myself backwards through the schools, fundamentally creative. And pursued a sort of a protracted but largely non-stellar academic sort of adventure in psychology and philosophy, all the things about, I guess, what it is to be a person and to interact with other people. For that reason, I never struck up a solid, sustained career. And for that reason, and probably sort of identify for a lot of people, I ended up working in hospitality. In bars, restaurants, hotels, and the like. It was through there, I guess, that I kind of fulfilled a personal fondness for being with people, helping people, learning from people. And it was there that 12 years ago-ish I met for the first time the Hope family. Yeah, so fourth generation hopes used to visit at a club that I managed. I looked after the hospitality there.
Wow.
And in fact, the first encounter was a get-together, a conference of embalmers. And believe you me, the barman, is the man you want to talk to about your secrets. I was fascinated.
Yeah.
And I saw these people who were vibrant and I'll call it dark-humoured, but appropriate and respectful, and just this amazing aspect to them. And I think I probably saw a bit of myself in it. And I looked after these people. And what resulted from that, from several encounters, was the company advertised an information evening. And in that, they advised that they were going to hold an evening where they would talk about funeral service and all the different sort of elements of it. A fascinating topic for everyone. Taboo, in part, sinister, mythological, mysterious, worrying, fascinating.
Yeah.
And so all of these people gathered. And as I'm aware, it was actually a very inspired recruitment project. And what they were doing is they were to sit there and walk through a presentation about funeral service, contemporary funeral service in 2012, about the company tradition and everything else. Do you want to learn more? And meanwhile,
they're picking out the gems.
Yeah, they were reading people.
Of course.
They were reading people.
I love it.
And funeral directors are pretty handy at reading people.
Yeah.
Empathy overload. Good understanding of behavioural psychology, great conversationalists in general, ideally. I didn't make it to the night. I know. I didn't make it. And that's because hospitality is a bit of a pig.
Yeah,
and of course, the service industry, you work the small hours. Everyone's had a skinful and a great meal, and heads home, feeling a bit blissed, and you're there, picking up the pieces before going into your bit. So I didn't make it, and the following morning I thought about it, and I went, you know what, that wasn't a spurious kind of interest. So I thought I feel like I've missed something there.
Wow.
And so I bowled down. I dropped in the following morning, unannounced, and I said, hi. I said, I'm Chaim. I have met, the hopes before, and I'm disappointed I missed last night.
Wow. And that alone is a sign as well, isn't it, to them that, this is a special person here. Yeah.
And in our, our people, maybe 24, 25, and, maybe including some of the staff who look after our cups of teas and casual staff, we're a company of about 30 people. And we work like it's a hive. And so the lovely lady who greeted me at the reception, she instantly was activated by my introduction and the fact that I was sincere and open and interested. And so word flowed through, and within, it seemed like an instant, Jeanette Hope appeared and recognised me, and we had a wee bit of a laugh, and a bit of a what are you up to? What are you doing? Because like as not, I was there perhaps because someone from my family had died. Because people present in very different ways when they're at that time, at a time of need. So anyway, I had a chance to introduce myself, and I said, I'm disappointed I missed last night. It cascaded into their interview process.
Yeah.
Naturally enough.
Can understand.
Because that was really why they'd done what they'd done. And I possibly, in terms of strategy, missing the first bus was possibly the best thing I'd ever done.
Totally.
Yeah.
You got your one-on-one with Jeanette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A great yarn from there. They interviewed me and they asked me some provocative questions and probably some interesting screening questions. They asked me about my sort of spiritual worldview. They asked me if I believed in ghosts. Some interesting, respectful filters, because we all walk different paths, and I don't think they necessarily would have been questions that deleted me from process, but they were wanting to learn more about me. Yeah. And they asked what my experience of death was to date, and I was able to tell them that I'd had the two grandparents that survived in my childhood. Died when I was 7 and 12 respectively, and I was a sheltered accessory to all of that. I remember the calls and the moments when my parents learnt about their mums dying, and I remember pronounced expression of grief, and lock and key. Very much a managed prescriptive process with very little openness and attendance to the trauma of that loss of losing your mum. And so I was unable to help in a native instinctual way at that stage, and I was shepherded off to the edges. And I'd venture that's because our perhaps our culture at that stage, the culture that I was brought up in, was all about reducing the impact of death and its harm and its trauma.
You need to shelter people.
I wasn't involved. So I talked about that. And then we moved through, and it was very civil, and it was one of those. It felt lovely. It was a lovely interview, and I came away from it with that feeling of and you reflect on it, and you're like, oh gosh, well I hope that went well, and I really would, I think I'd like that job. It's a very interesting thing, and I really didn't have the gumption to interview them and ask more questions. I was a younger chap, I guess, at 38. A fascinating thing happened. And the following day, after, my having told them about my very limited experience with death,
yes.
Which isn't uncommon, and ideally we would hope that we're not too involved with it. More on that later. I got a phone call. My godfather had died.
Oh.
Yeah, and he died in Rangiora in north of Christchurch. He was a Yugoslav immigrant. He had a younger Māori wife, and I moved to attend his tangi, and it was at a place called Tuahiwi. And in that, the service was in a very old, beautiful heritage church. It was led by a Greek Orthodox minister. There were prayers and canticles in Latin. The church was thick with incense. There was not a chorister, but there was a chanter, a person who was delivering passages from scripture, but chanting it. Yeah. At the end of the service, I helped carry Mirko's casket from the church. We positioned it on the back of a hearse before we decided to carry it across two paddocks and the intervening fences as a group to the cemetery. I helped to lower his casket. I felt hot tears on my hands, and then I was involved with backfilling the plot, which is to take the shovels and to make the plot level again.
Quite a timely end-to-end experience for you.
At the conclusion, I turned, and there was a windmill there which had been completely still. It was a still day, a hot Christchurch day, and at the end the mill creaked and turned and began moving. I kid you not. I flew home, and there was a message a day later saying that the Hopes had enjoyed catching up with me and they'd like to talk again.
Right, of course.
So I came in for my second interview, and I said to them, is there a chance we could revisit one of the questions from the first interview?
I've got some new insight.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was fateful. I'm not sure, but it was me. Besides perhaps a late adolescent tragedy where a university mate died. But again, a very sort of a vague, sweeping involvement with the actual grief there. It was probably the fourth death I'd been involved with, but it heralded the many hundreds of special deaths that I've been next to since.
Yeah, which is a lot, obviously.
Yeah.
Chaim, I wonder, could you tell us what a typical day looks like to you in your job?
Yes,
career?
I can. Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. We, our company has a briefing every morning, which sounds...
you have a stand-up, like a work in progress.
Yeah, we have a wee look at what has happened since we last caught up, because we have working days, and they finish at 5 o'clock, and a lot of us get to head home around that time once we've attended to and ensured that everything we've needed to have sorted in that part of the day Think, submitting newspaper notices and ensuring that they're going to appear in the paper the following day. Think people have had a chance to come down and visit and spend time next to their special people, either on the day that they've died or the following day, what have you. Or the many different myriad things that are about funeral service. So the following morning we talk about what's happened in the intervening time, and that's led by a duty team. In our world, and with our company structure, we have 8 rostered funeral directors, and we also have a rostered embalmer. On any given evening, typically, there's 2 funeral directors and 1 embalmer that have their phones nearby, but know that they needed to have formed up their life so that they're available, because people die.
At all hours of the day and night.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. They do. There's a metric around it. Typically 3 people die in Dunedin every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, for that reason, we're going to catch a phone call from someone, or someone's going to arrive at our doorway and want to tell us about what's going on and that they need help. And usually that we've looked after them before. Yeah. So look, at 9 o'clock in the morning, a group of people, sometimes with a cup of tea, arrive into a space with 4 walls and a big screen, which has some pretty neat software, which records very helpful information for us, tells us about the people that we're looking after, what their needs are, and what that means our operations are going to look like. I can recall a busy day in the 12 years that I've worked where we served 7 funerals in one day.
Wow, that is a big day.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, we would very much like for each family we look after to feel that there's no intrusion or deflection for our energies and our care.
Yeah.
And so we work very hard to structure things, but also to apply ourselves sensibly and sustainably to looking after them.
How many would you do in one day maximum as the leader of the service?
I have... Yeah, that's interesting. I think it'd be fair to say that you would attend maximally 3 services, but that wouldn't be on the basis that you were a cloak-wearing superhero that was attending to absolutely every detail. That's poor funeral service.
Yeah.
Communication, and not even delegation, more just collaboration with our colleague funeral directors, our colleague assistants, our administrators, the people that help with our hospitality, our designers who bring together sensational funeral media, which increasingly is a substantial and significant part of life story affirming funeral service. Our slideshows, our service cards, other dimensions there that help to describe someone and celebrate them. So on that day you might dance between 2 churches and interact with the family and have fully briefed colleagues who are there to understand and already have established rapport and relationship with the family. Yeah,
wrapping around you. And then you've touched on it with regard to slideshows and things, but so much innovation and change in a digital way, isn't there, with how we are experiencing this end of life care and service. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I do.
Yeah.
I want to tell you about COVID.
Fast forwarded everything, didn't it?
Yeah, and some very real, some stressful years for people. The COVID period itself, obviously, and in our profession, obviously in the early days of that, the notion of what is this going to look like, and images that emerge out of America and Europe that were, far from that idea that you're going to have a sort of a boon in your industry, that things are going to get busy and it's going to be great. It was a horrifying prospect. And we heard accounts from colleagues overseas, and it was heartbreaking. Such a contorted and restricting experience for people as well. Obviously, New Zealand approached things the way they did with the system of lockdowns. and the restriction levels, which I'll remember.
Forever.
Yeah, I will. That was
Yeah.
that itself, the restriction on the natural instinct of how people would gather and support one another and what they would do. So we're problem solvers. So we adapted, and I'll be fair to ourselves. We innovated, and we helped do things that only we could do, that helped connect people in new ways, but in genuine and cathartic and therapeutic ways. So even whilst an example, perhaps, to mention, we became reasonably, in fact, I got referred to as Martin Scorsese once. You'll wonder why I've told you that. To meet one family's need, I directed and filmed a video viewing, which was a little feature.
Wow.
With a very small audience ultimately, but it was for a family that had no way via the rules. And, we understood those and respected them as much as we would have liked to have simply defied them. But what I did in that situation was, with the superpowers of an iPhone, I synthesised a viewing experience. So, and, right down to the banal details. So I pretended with the phone, if you like, that I was approaching one of the entrances to our building, so that the rhododendron trees were there, and a careful wee fountain was there, and a nice clean window to express to people that we care for our facilities, and that it's a safe and good place to be.
I'm feeling like VR's the next step, Chaim.
Interesting. Yeah, we moved about, and I made sure to capture the wee title "Gold Room" on the door, which talks about where we are and a genuine standard of care. And then I moved through a room adjacent to the next room, and showed some pictures from the Hope's Art collection, which showed local landscapes, a pleasant, settled, aesthetic environment, a place to be, and as if to suggest that the person is pausing and waiting before that next bit, which is a big deal. And then moved into the space, and then subtly panned, zoomed, whatever, to show a little booklet, which was a Sure Bets booklet, which had the odds on the horses and things. This gentleman was passionate about his horse racing, and there was a golf club landing up there, and some things that we had. In accordance with the directions about what we could do. Those items came with him when he travelled, because it was important when he came from the home. And you've got to understand, we moved him from his home with minimal interaction and distancing with the family. And the family were on the understanding that they would not see him again, potentially. This is day 1, day 2 of level 4 lockdowns. And we don't know if a pandemic is going to sweep through, and this was really
early.
This is their leave taking. This is really early. And then slowly, subtly, and with all things considered, to respectfully care for and attend to how this gent appeared, and look, this kind of cleverness on top of genuine expert embalming care. So this man has been looked after so that he is settled and peaceful and at rest, basically. But then to capture him and his face, and to move, and to
feel like they were there,
to report that yes, he is dead, which is a fundamental of the viewing experience, because it's fair to have disbelief when someone dies. It's fair to say, no, I don't accept that, or that doesn't feel right. But we captured this, and then honestly, with beating heart, we then paired it, we edited it just a little bit, but I did very well on the long shot, hence the Scorsese reference. And then we put really respectful faded titles on it, in memory of, and we paired it with Maroon 5's, I'm not going to do it, I can't. I can't remember the song, but it was a beautiful popular song at the time.
I know what you mean.
And we then did we Dropbox it to family? I think we did.
Right.
And look, it was with a fair amount of nerve, because it was fairly unprecedented. And I'm not saying we reinvented. I think most funeral directors who were capable of looking after people were coming up with these sorts of things and these ideas, and the power of it for the family and for them to share with someone else. And so, it was an innovation. And to tie that to, I guess, probably the broader phenomena post-COVID, as services became possible through the different lockdown levels, say groups of 10, groups of 100 with vaccine passports. Remember all that?
I do.
Yeah, remember all that?
Yeah.
And people, with masks and, really cautious and on edge, not our usual sort of Kiwi tangihanga, the tradition of funeral ritual, which is to open up and to embrace and to weep, these things that, a pandemic kind of resists. What we found, of course, was that people took to live streaming like ducks to water. Yeah. Live streaming had been around for a while.
Long time.
But there was still a resistance, and there was still I'm being not turning out, I'm failing my job, and also feel a wee bit voyeuristic over here because it's, I'm not in the room.
That turned it on its head, didn't it?
It has. Yeah. And what's interesting there is that a big funeral, let's say pre-COVID, let's say, a younger person has died and they're in the midst of their career and they're connected with sports clubs and, you could
be seeing 300-400 people wanting to be at a funeral.
Yeah, 500-600, with a lovely mix of, many generations and all these people turning out to recognise the person and support one another. So it's all changed. 2024, a big funeral, to be fair, is 250 bums on seats.
Right.
Dial into our live streaming service afterward and find that there are 450 unique connections.
Yeah.
And then look at a wee world map which shows you that someone in Tunisia has what? Share that with the family afterwards, and they go, Tunisia, no way.
Auntie
I know
Mary's
who that
on
is.
there.
Yeah, unbelievable. We haven't heard from her for a year. And
so it's made them more accessible, hasn't it?
It's there's some interesting philosophy in it, I guess. Is this the pointy end of transhumanism? Is our digital presence as meaningful as our personal presence these days? Arguably, yes, because we have feedback from people saying, hey, simple thing I know, but I joined the funeral service yesterday via live stream. It was a pleasure to be involved. It felt very special. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that person will tap off a tribute and a recollection afterwards. So it has gone as any of that concern that a digital involvement was somehow diminished or second class. And I know too that people for various concerns, mobility, health concerns, or maybe they're just an introvert, there'll be people who live stream locally. Or how we mix things up. You might be at work and you shift your lunch hour and then you live stream the service rather than driving out to try and find a park out east. And
often there is a feeling of, is it appropriate for me to attend? Not everybody feels comfortable, like we were talking about off camera, with death or with showcasing how they're feeling so publicly in a service. So you can sit at home on your own or at work and experience it.
Or as we see, and it's rather gorgeous, we'll get a call from a ministry and they'll say, hey, we've actually got a wee bit of a shindig planned. Right. We were at university with, this person. We're now all working with firms. We're gathering for 2:00.
We're live streaming it to the whole workforce.
Yeah, we're going to attend as a group in this place. And, far from thinking, that's out of our control and, we can't commercialise that. It's more like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Because good funeral service affirms and grows your relationship with death, which is fundamental. And it's, a personal relationship with death is non-negotiable.
It is an endpoint that we all face, is it not?
Yep.
There's no avoiding it.
Yeah. And, why let, superstition and fear shift that up any more than it needs to? Make it a positive relationship with death. Go to more funerals.
Yeah. Chaim, you're not going to believe this, but we are well out of time. And we've hardly scratched the surface of who you are, Hope and Sons, their place in our community. Shout out to Jeanette and Michael, by the way, because I do think that we need to use their names and say thank you so much for building the Hope and Sons brand in the way that you did after taking over from the rest of the family. But I do think there's, one more important question that I'd really love to ask you, and spend some time thinking and answering, but would you recommend people look to this as a career pathway? Is it a suitable career pathway? Is there future to it? And how are you feeling about it as a future career for yourself? There's a lot in that question.
Yeah, there is a lot in that question, and I'll answer succinctly. Yes, approach. It's a pretty esoteric and small scale profession. It's very networked. So all of the funeral directors through a long, skinny country like New Zealand are all interconnected. But it is also a growth industry. is what you could say. Yeah. It will always need workers. It will always need people with skills, with the ability to help other people. Approach and talk to funeral directors. Yeah. We have a traditional sort of stereotype, which is a foreboding, disinterested, sort of hands clasped, stern, sober-looking man.
It's exactly how we describe you, Chaim.
Yeah, all of that. But no, explore it and ask questions, and if it feels like something, if you want to learn more about it, then talk to a funeral director, and they'll give you guidance about how you might become involved. I'd encourage people, and it's a very there are many different skill sets and traits and abilities that are relevant, which is and it's incredibly stimulating and varied. It basically, your day, you asked me about a typical day. There is no typical day.
No.
You can script it, and you have to be ready to turn on a dime and alter everything and move out of the region. You have to take a call from overseas to organise someone to be repatriated. You need to take a call from someone that has lost just the weakest person, and then be next to them and help them. It's an incredibly real and affirming role. So, just ask questions around death, and that's what I'd suggest.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Look, I think as a result of this, there will be some community members that will want to seek out your support if and when they need that. If somebody passes on, how do people reach you to be a funeral celebrant for them?
Yes, absolutely. So we traditional modes of communication. Our telephone is the trick to do. We have built a website which also provides layers of information for you to find out more about us and what we do, and for you to lead yourself through that process with the things that might concern you, from the obvious to the less obvious and the more detailed. But look, really, it's about a voice and a heart, and those phone calls, those difficult phone calls, are the phone calls that we take, and then we help to inform you and guide you, and lead where you need us to lead. But another thing we encourage is contact ahead of death, and we might refer to that as a pre-arrangement, which is a chance to sit down and talk about express plans, and that often involves a number of people from a family. We're a joint situation to learn more about what happens when people die, how we observe people's wishes from spiritual or faith-based or cultural sorts of influences. So those are the ways to contact us. But as you'd imagine, we're very responsive to any mode.
Yes, no, I do. Hey, I think we need to get you back and actually talk more about death and perhaps that pre-planning and how healthy that can be for a family. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the many other dimensions of, our death rituals, the things that we do, will naturally always reflect what is happening in society, in our society, and everyone knows this. Our society is dynamic. It's moving and it's changing, and there's so many other values and emergent ideas and ways we recognise people and our differences, but also our commonalities. So, of course, death is not static and dusty. You know, the old, you know, the creaky door and the grey headstone. Why would it be that?
No.
That's an outmoded way of thinking about things.
Shifting, isn't it?
So many things to talk about, and it would be a pleasure.
Excellent. Well, we will make sure that happens. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you again. Thanks, Chaim.
Thank you, Bex.
Cheers.